Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following report is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What happened inside that courtroom wasn't just a legal bombshell. It was a cultural earthquake. The seventh day of the Sean Diddy Combs trial was supposed to be like the rest: slow, controlled, predictable. The prosecution was scheduled to bring Cassie back to the stand. Defense attorneys had prepared rebuttals. Journalists expected another long, tension-filled day of testimony. And yet, the moment the courtroom doors opened at 11:04 a.m., everything changed, because walking in unannounced, unprotected, and completely unexpected was Kid Rock. And he didn't just walk in like a man coming to observe. He walked in like a man who knew he was about to detonate the entire courtroom. There was no entourage, no security, no handlers, just Robert Ritchie, better known as Kid Rock, dressed in a dark three-piece suit, sunglasses still on, holding a thick brown folder under one arm. His expression flat, focused, almost cold. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He walked straight past the back rows and took a seat on the far left bench of the front gallery. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Even the clerks and court officers froze for just a second, as if confirming they'd actually seen what they thought they had. Cassie's attorney turned mid-sentence to see what was happening. Diddy didn't notice right away. He was hunched over, whispering to one of his lawyers about the next line of questioning. But when he looked up, when he finally saw who had entered the room, witnesses say his entire demeanor cracked. His shoulders stiffened. His hand froze on his notepad. He said nothing, but the color drained from his face. Because this wasn't a rival rapper walking in to spectate. This was someone who had publicly criticized Diddy for over a decade. Someone who had remained largely outside the hip-hop elite circles, and therefore, someone Diddy couldn't influence, buy off, or silence. This was Kid Rock. And whatever he came to say or show, Diddy knew he wouldn't be able to spin it. The judge acknowledged the disruption with a quick nod to the bailiff, then returned to her docket. But the courtroom energy had shifted completely. It wasn't just observers who noticed, jurors did too. Juror 6, a school teacher from Pasadena, leaned forward in her seat, her pen already ready. Juror 9 whispered something quickly to the alternate juror beside him. And in the corner of the room, a sketch artist began furiously redrawing the new scene. It got even more surreal when the prosecution stood, asked for a sidebar, and calmly announced that Kid Rock had delivered a sealed dossier. One that, according to them, contained communications, dated materials, and documentation relevant to the patterns of behavior previously outlined in the plaintiff's statement. That's when the press gallery erupted. No cameras were allowed in the courtroom, but that didn't stop texts, tweets, and whispered phone calls from leaking the news within seconds. Kid Rock just entered Diddy's courtroom with a folder. What followed would change the trial forever. The folder Kid Rock brought wasn't for drama. It wasn't a prop, it was a weapon. Inside the thick brown dossier were more than just papers. It contained what attorneys would later call a structured and time-verified packet of corroborating evidence. In plain terms, it was a bomb dropped onto the defense table. The courtroom hadn't seen it coming. Even Diddy's attorneys looked blindsided. The folder was turned over to the clerk, then passed up to the bench. Judge Harmon spent 10 silent minutes reviewing the contents herself. She flipped slowly, expression unreadable, while the rest of the courtroom waited in almost unbearable tension. Diddy sat motionless, arms folded, staring at a point on the ground. Cassie watched carefully from the witness box. Kid Rock, meanwhile, sat stone still in the gallery, his hands folded, his eyes hidden behind dark lenses. The judge looked up. Then she said it. The court finds the material admissible under the pattern behavior clause. And with that sentence, the game changed. The prosecution began reading from the packet. It wasn't just emails, it was a timeline, stamped and backed by metadata. Dozens of entries stretching from as early as 2013 to as recent as 2022, documenting parties, travel logs, backstage security reports, and handwritten testimonies from former employees. Among them, a catering coordinator who claimed Cassie was never permitted to eat meals with guests, a driver who said she was forbidden from speaking to male artists without permission, and a former studio assistant who described a house rule where Cassie had to hand over her phone before Diddy's guests arrived. And the most damning entry, signed affidavit from a music tour manager known publicly only as Witness R, who described multiple instances of emotional manipulation, verbal threats, and one 2016 episode in which Diddy allegedly screamed at Cassie in front of staff after seeing her laughing with another performer. According to the document, he said, "Don't forget who made you. Don't you ever forget who owns you." The courtroom was stunned. This wasn't internet gossip. It wasn't rumor. These were sworn statements introduced in federal court, backed by time-stamped messages and flight logs. The defense looked rattled. They scrambled through binders, conferred rapidly, and requested a delay to cross-reference the evidence. The judge denied it. The jury will hear this. Kid Rock never moved. Reporters outside the courtroom picked up the story instantly. Breaking headlines began to appear online in real time. Kid Rock delivers bombshell evidence at Diddy trial. New witness statements confirm abuse patterns, say prosecutors. By the time court recessed for lunch, the internet had already exploded. But inside the courtroom, something more important was happening. The jury had just seen a new reality, one not shaped by Diddy's press machine or years of industry silence. They saw a pattern. They saw corroboration. And they saw the beginning of the end. Because what Kid Rock brought wasn't just a folder, it was a fuse. And the courtroom had just struck the match. I've been in this industry for nearly 3 decades. 30 years of flashing lights, record deals, standing ovations, and closed doors. And in that time, I've seen things. Things I shrugged off. Things I laughed at. Things I excused because that's just how the game was played. You look the other way. You mind your business. You stay in your lane. And that's exactly what lets men like Sean Combs stay powerful. The courtroom gallery shifted, a collective breath being held. Pens scratched against notepads as journalists leaned forward, scribbling faster than their hands could move. Diddy's lead attorney narrowed his eyes, leaning in. Across the room, Diddy didn't flinch, but he did look away. First at the polished courtroom floor, then at the ceiling lights, and then nowhere in particular, anywhere but at the man on the witness stand. Kid Rock continued. "I remember the parties, the music, the cameras, the VIP lounges. I remember the tours, months on the road where nothing was off limits if you were at the top of the food chain. I remember seeing Cassie walk into a room, confident at first, then shrinking back the moment she made eye contact with him. She'd lower her gaze. Every single time." He paused, voice steady, but edged with regret. "And I remember how people talked about her. Not to her, about her. Like she was a thing, not a person, something owned, not someone loved. And I didn't say anything. I let it slide because that's what you did if you wanted to keep your spot. That's silence. That's on me." The courtroom was frozen. Even the judge, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, didn't interrupt. The defense stayed seated, knowing full well this wasn't grandstanding, this was a confession. Then came the moment that turned a quiet reckoning into an earthquake. I've got friends who still work closely with Diddy, some in security, some in operations. One of them handed me this. Kid Rock held up a printed screenshot from a 2018 text exchange. It's from a junior staffer at Diddy's Miami estate. They were texting with a security guard. Here's what it says. He read it out loud. "She asked again to leave early. He told me no one leaves unless he says so." Kid Rock looked up, locking eyes with the jury. "That's not a rumor. That's not speculation. That's a message, a real one, documented. This happened." The courtroom reaction was immediate. Juror 11 blinked rapidly and underlined a line in their notes. Juror 3 stopped writing altogether, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the witness. "And if you think this is rare," Kid Rock said, "it's not. This industry's been built on silence. We reward silence. We call it loyalty. We call it professionalism. But what it really is fear. We punish people for speaking out. We exile them, smear them, ruin them. And I've had enough." Then he turned, not toward the jury, not toward the judge, toward the gallery, toward the press, the defense attorneys, the people watching from afar. "I came here today to say what too many of us have known for far too long. This man, Sean Combs, has hurt people. Maybe not with fists, maybe not in public, but hurt is hurt. And if Cassie is brave enough to finally say it out loud, then the least I can do is stand beside her and say it with her." His voice softened, but didn't waver. "I believe you." A ripple passed through the courtroom like a tremor. Gasps, shifting in seats, camera lenses zooming in, scribbles turning frantic. But Kid Rock didn't break eye contact. He didn't flinch, he didn't smile. He just sat back down, folded his arms, and stared ahead. Judge Harmon gave a slow, steady nod. "Thank you, Mr. Ritchie," she said. Diddy's legal team erupted in whispers. Notes were passed rapidly across the defense table. His lead attorney stood to request a delay. But Judge Harmon shut it down immediately. "We proceed," she declared. Outside the courthouse, chaos ignited. Within minutes, reporters who had been live tweeting from the courtroom saw their updates blow up. Screenshots of the text message Kid Rock introduced went viral instantly. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, every social platform was on fire. A journalist's tweet quoting Kid Rock, "I believe you, Cassie," hit 1 million likes within the hour. Soon, video snippets surfaced. Grainy, low-res clips recorded from adjacent court monitors were reposted endlessly. Then came the big splash, where Kid Rock testifies began trending worldwide. Within just a few hours, the hashtag overtook major topics on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Comment sections weren't just active, they were explosive. Users shared old videos, old interviews, and cryptic quotes from Diddy that now, under this new light, looked hauntingly different. One TikTok video showed a red carpet clip from 2016. Cassie, flinching slightly as Diddy reached for her arm. It racked up 20 million views in under 2 hours. "We didn't see it then," a top comment read, "but it was always there." Then came the celebrities. At first, they were subtle. A quote retweet here, a story repost there. But by late afternoon, full-throated support poured in. Chris Rock tweeted, "Takes guts to speak up when staying quiet pays better." Alicia Keys posted a black square on her Instagram story. The caption, "Not anymore. No further explanation. None needed." Then came Taylor Swift. Yes, Taylor Swift. She liked a post that read, "When the industry protects predators, it's up to those with power to speak up." Kid Rock did that today. That post passed 1 million likes in just over an hour. And still, Kid Rock said nothing. No tweets, no interviews, no press release. He didn't need to say a thing. The world was already speaking for him. Inside the courthouse, Diddy's legal team was scrambling. They requested a private sidebar with the judge. Court sources later confirmed they were considering a formal objection to what they called trial. Disruption by non-party interference. But it was too late. The media wasn't just reporting on the trial anymore, they were driving it. TMZ ran a headline that read, "From rockstar to whistleblower, Kid Rock's courthouse earthquake." Meanwhile, Diddy's collaborators began distancing themselves. A former backup dancer from a 2009 tour posted to Instagram, "We saw stuff, we were told to ignore it. Not anymore." Busta Rhymes deleted 3 posts featuring Diddy from past tour memories. Missy Elliott unfollowed him entirely. And Usher, long seen as one of Diddy's closest allies, posted a cryptic message to his stories. Sometimes distance is the only form of self-respect. But the true shock came that evening. Revolt, Diddy's own media company, posted a vague but chilling statement. "We are monitoring developments and will adjust internal partnerships accordingly." Translation, even his empire was beginning to crack. This wasn't just about court anymore. It was cultural, it was moral, and it was collapsing in real time. At the center of it all was Kid Rock, sitting quietly in a courtroom, arms folded, no press tour, no camera crew. Just a man who had finally said the one thing no one else had dared to say, out loud. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person with nothing to lose to say something no one else will. And that's exactly what lit the fire. By the time court resumed later that afternoon, the impact had already been felt. Kid Rock's testimony was being analyzed on every major news outlet. Public opinion was shifting. But more than that, something was unraveling inside the courtroom too. Diddy. Cassie returned to the witness stand with a renewed sense of strength. Her voice clearer, her gaze sharper. She wasn't just recalling trauma anymore. She was confronting it, reclaiming it, and sitting just a few rows behind her was Kid Rock, watching in silence. Still, unmoving, supportive. His presence said everything he didn't need to. Diddy, meanwhile, was no longer composed. He sat rigid at the defense table, jaw clenched, hands gripping the wood so hard his knuckles turned white. He scribbled notes furiously, then suddenly stopped, frozen, eyes locked on the floor. His team whispered urgently in his ear. He brushed them off. And then came the moment. Cassie mentioned Miami, 2018. 2018. The courtroom was holding its breath. Cassie sat upright on the witness stand, recounting one of the darkest moments of her past. She spoke of an incident at one of Diddy's private estates, an exclusive event attended by record executives, brand partners, and heavy security. She described how, after being seen speaking briefly with a male assistant from a record label, everything changed. That night, she was locked inside a guest suite. For over 24 hours, she said softly, no phone, no food, just silence. Her voice didn't waver. He came in and said, "You think you can humiliate me in front of people who owe me their careers? You stay in here until you remember who made you." The courtroom sat frozen. And then it happened. A thunderous bang echoed across the room as Diddy slammed his hand on the defense table. "That's not what happened!" he roared, his voice erupting across the chamber. Gasps followed. One juror jumped. The court reporter hesitated mid-keystroke. Even Judge Harmon looked momentarily stunned, but she recovered quickly. "Mr. Combs," she said, her voice firm and ice cold, "that is your only warning. One more outburst and you will be removed." But Diddy wasn't listening. He wasn't even looking at the judge. He was staring across the gallery at Kid Rock. "You," he growled, pointing a finger like a dagger. "You've been waiting for this. You'll regret it." Two security guards moved fast, stepping between Diddy and the gallery. His lawyers whispered frantically, urging calm, but Diddy's glare stayed locked on Kid Rock. Kid Rock didn't blink. He simply leaned back in his seat, crossed one leg, and watched. Silent, unmoved, Cassie didn't flinch either. She remained composed, hands resting gently on her lap. The judge allowed the tension to linger before delivering the line that would define the day. "Mr. Combs, control yourself, or I will." It wasn't just a reprimand, it was a reckoning. A sentence that cut deeper than Diddy's explosion. For the first time, the man who built an empire on power and control had lost both. And outside that courtroom, the ripple was turning into a wave. News of Diddy's courtroom meltdown spread like wildfire. Social media lit up. Hashtags, threads, videos. But the real movement wasn't happening in public. It was happening in boardrooms. At a high-rise in Los Angeles, executives from one of the top 3 music conglomerates held an emergency meeting. According to a leak, one exec opened with a grim warning. "This could be our Weinstein moment. We cannot be caught on the wrong side of this." Inside PR firms, publicists were calling their clients, musicians, actors, influencers, anyone who had ever worked with Diddy. The advice was unanimous. Distance yourself. Now. Press teams began scrubbing social media. Old tweets disappeared, photos were deleted, playlist links on Spotify were quietly updated. And over at Revolt, Diddy's own media company, chaos erupted. Rolling Stone later reported that 2 board members launched internal reviews within 24 hours of Kid Rock's courtroom appearance. A leaked Slack message from a senior Revolt staffer summed up the mood. "If this keeps escalating, our brand is going to be radioactive." By midday, 3 advertisers had quietly pulled out of upcoming campaigns. One luxury watch brand issued a vague statement about reassessing partnerships. Another canceled a Revolt-sponsored product launch that had been scheduled for the following week. Diddy, once seen as a symbol of untouchable success, was becoming a liability. Artists began pulling back, too. Janelle Monáe removed highlights of a past collaboration with Diddy from her Instagram. A senior executive at a major label tweeted, and quickly deleted, "Sometimes protecting talent means letting them go." But perhaps the biggest shift came without a single word. Late that night, fans noticed Diddy's songs had vanished from several major Spotify editorial playlists, Rap Caviar, New Music Friday, and more. No statement, no warning, just silence. People weren't waiting for the verdict, they were already walking away. And through it all, Kid Rock said nothing he didn't need to. His presence had shattered the industry's wall of silence. And now everyone else was scrambling to pick up the pieces. But the final blow, it came not from a rock star or a celebrity. It came from someone nobody had seen before. Late in the day, the prosecution introduced a surprise witness, a woman listed only as Witness 41, a former live-in house manager at Diddy's Malibu estate between 2017 and 2019. The courtroom leaned in. She confirmed her job. She described the house. Then quietly, she explained the rules. "I wasn't allowed to speak to Miss Ventura unless she spoke first," she said. That was the rule. She described a complex internal surveillance system. Cameras not just outside, but inside, focused on hallways, the kitchen, and the guest suite. And then she paused. "I remember one night in 2018, she said. She came out of her room. She looked scared. She asked me for a phone. I said I didn't have one. She said, 'He's not letting me leave.'" Gasps, the courtroom froze. And then, the final nail. With the judge's permission, the prosecution played a voicemail. One just turned over by Kid Rock's legal team the day before. It had been verified by forensic audio experts, dated December 2023. Kid Rock's voice filled the room. "If this ends up in court, I'm ready to talk. I'm done watching people get hurt. She's not fighting this alone." Diddy didn't move. He didn't blink. He sat pale, silent, small. The courtroom wasn't just hearing testimony anymore. It was witnessing a transformation. The case had shifted from credibility to undeniable truth. There were too many voices now. Too much evidence. Too much momentum. Cassie's testimony. Witness 41, the voicemail, the cultural shift. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. And Diddy? Once a titan, now just a man sitting alone, watching his empire fall apart. As court adjourned, Kid Rock stood, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out. No words, no gestures, just the click of cameras behind him. On the stand, Cassie finally allowed herself a small smile. Not of triumph, but of peace. The fight was no longer hers alone, and as the courtroom emptied, one truth rang louder than ever. This wasn't just about Diddy. This was about an industry that finally had to face itself.